scary. And I'm at the point where if somebody's not going to like me or somebody's going to comment on my body, that's their issue. That's not my issue. It used to be my issue, and I almost died because of it. I don't care anymore.
Welcome to Postgrads. Two Columbia J School alumni walk into a bar. Carmen, what do you think the punchline should be?
Oh, I think the punchline should be they're going to want to know whether the cocktails are actually locally sourced or if it's just PR fluff.
That's why nobody likes journalists. Today we have Carmen Cusido, who graduated part-time from J School in 2010 and is now a communication professional freelance writer based in New Jersey and also an adjunct professor. Thank you for joining us today, Carmen.
Thank you so much.
We want to start with your upbringing. You mentioned in our pre-interview that your parents were exiles who had fled Castro in Cuba. As a second-generation immigrant, how do you think this shaped your personality and career choice?
I mean, yeah, it from the time I was a child, and certainly the Soviet Union was still in existence then. I was born in 1983, so there was a lot of discussion about family that unfortunately was still in Cuba, family that was living in the United States, and the common theme from the time that I was a child is, the importance of having been born and growing up in the United States where we had things like freedom of the press and freedom to be able to vote how you want to vote. Um, and so that kind of shaped my thinking. I want to do something where I get to talk to people and I get to ask them how they feel about just life and about everything. And I get to hold politicians and other people accountable. And so that was part of what inspired me to start a career in journalism.
What led you to journalism school, and what are the differences between Rutgers and Columbia in terms of journalism education?
Wow. Okay. So I think around the age of 16, my favorite high school teacher, may he rest in peace, Jack O'Connor, I was part of the high school newspaper
Mhm.
as an editor at the time. And he had said to me, the best school in the world for journalism is across the Hudson River. It's at Columbia University.
That's the first time you hear about this.
Yes. Yes, and I was so impressed and I was like, "Oh my God, I want to go there someday." The reason I didn't for undergrad was because I think I was a little scared by the thought that I had to take too many math classes.
Mm-hmm.
And also Rutgers was an amazing opportunity. It was a state school. I got a lot of financial aid to be able to go. But I will always be grateful for my experience at Rutgers because not only did I meet some of the bestest friends, I got to work and be an editor for 3 out of the 4 years,
Yeah.
at the college paper, at the Daily Targum, and so that actually taught me more about journalism than some of my journalism classes, but I
I
was able to
understand.
start yeah, I mean, I was able to interview the president of the university when I was, like, 20,
Wow.
which was very cool,
That is a lot actually for
yes.
20-year-old
Yes.
student. Yeah.
Yes.
So during J school, I think you mentioned that you were in the religion class to Ireland. How does it feel like doing reporting in foreign country, and what were your thoughts before you went?
So I was actually really scared. Well, first of all, I don't like flying. And
Oh
I've been
yeah.
to 26 countries, all 50 states and Puerto Rico, but flying still makes me anxious. And this was my first time in Europe and my second country altogether.
Mm,
So I was scared from that part of it, like just being on a really long flight. I'd met so many wonderful people that were just really gracious and open. And so I wasn't as afraid of
mm,
interviewing people in a foreign country. I
yeah.
was more afraid of like the flights, if that makes sense.
I see. I see. So after graduating, you have also worked at several newsrooms. So what are some of your favorite beats you have developed?
Ooh, that's a good one. Let me actually tie this in a little bit
Mm-hmm.
to covering religion.
Yeah.
So, my last ever full-time newspaper job was at the Charlotte Observer in North Carolina when they needed a reporter to cover the midday Zhuoya Ma prayer before the DNC in 2012. I said, "Well, I can go because I know about this and I think I can, I hope I can cover it in a thoughtful way." And they sent me and they were really grateful. Both the people that I interviewed and my newsroom because no one else really understood.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a way that J School kind of helped me in my career. But I really love covering immigration, education in particular. My mom had been a grade school teacher, so that's something that's very important to me. Um, I covered a lot of county and municipal government,
Mm,
but those can be very interesting too because there's a lot of people that sometimes go and speak at these meetings, and then you can find other story ideas from these meetings that
yeah.
happen.
And also you're a speechwriter later in your career. So, what was that experience like?
So I mentioned it during the pre-interview that to me, speech writing is essentially like writing an op-ed but longer.
Mm.
Because you really get to know the person that you're writing for, and you get to know their quirks and how they speak and what they like to quote and what books they read. And so I mainly did that for the former commissioner of education, who's now the president of a university in New Jersey. And so I knew that he liked certain books, so I would try to quote the books
It feels like
in his
you did
speeches.
some investigative
Yeah.
work on him before you write for him.
Well, you have to because every journalism skills can really be translated to all kinds of other careers.
Education has been a big part of your profile. You have studied at Rutgers, Columbia, and also gained certificates from Yale and Harvard Business School. So, what keeps you motivated to keep learning and explore new areas?
Oh, I hope I don't get too emotional with this. But I think education is something no one can take away from you. And it's something that was very important to my parents, especially to my mother, and she was an educator. And I think that learning continues beyond when you get your degree. You just have to your whole life is about learning. So and I'm a proud nerd, so I think that's part of why I keep kind of going back to school every few years.
So you follow your mother's steps. You became an educator later. Well, you are still an educator now. So what's fascinating part of doing this?
Seeing how excited people get when they learn something new or when they start their careers, and it's something that they thought they previously couldn't do, because that was me. And so to see that in the younger generation is a lot of fun. And I will say this, it's also helped me a lot with public speaking because I used to be a lot more scared of being in front of groups of people.
Hmm.
And so it's helped from that way. But I also love connecting people. So anytime that I can connect a student to one of my colleagues or anything, it's really fun to watch.
I can relate to this because I believe that you can remember a good teacher for a long time. I remember I used to be really shy girl before 5 or 6, but when I entered the first year in elementary school, I had a wonderful teacher her name is Wang Juan. I still remember her name, and she told me to speak in public. Don't be shy of it. So she always point me and ask me to read loudly in for the whole class, and I did it several times, and I feel like, oh, I'm not shy anymore. I'm able to speak in public. I still remember that moment. It's just like it hits you when you say something, and I can just relate it to it.
That's cool. Yeah.
So I believe a good teacher affects people a lot,
And
even
it's
the whole
always great
life.
when you have somebody, like you said, that you can remember decades later, for sure.
Decades? 2 decades.
Only 2 years, only 2 years ago.
So you also worked as an adjunct professor. What classes were you teaching?
I've taught different classes. I've taught journalism and public relations, depending on the need of whatever the university might be.
Mm-hmm.
I will say the funnest class that I taught, and this was 2 years ago, was at Montclair. It was a fully bilingual class that I co-taught with Tom Franklin, who took the most iconic September 11th photo, the one of the flag, the people hoisting up the flag. Yeah. So the fact
Wow.
that I got to teach with him was just an amazing honor. But also, our students were just amazing. They were really just go-getters, and he took them with a couple of other professors on a spring break trip to Arizona where they interviewed immigrants at the border, which was very impressive. And a lot of
Mhm.
those students graduated in the last year or so. But the cool part about that class was that it was fully bilingual. So I would teach mostly in Spanish, and then Tom taught in English, and our students would go back and forth between both the languages.
So, one of the things I'm always curious about is the accuracy in translation and how we go about fact checking them. Sometimes translation can be objective, and we risk alternating the tones and word choices for our sources. So, how do we combat these issues while translating our interviews?
To be honest, I still have some struggles with that.
Mm-hmm.
I try to do the best that I can, but there are some words that just don't or like some meanings that don't translate as easily. I mean, in all languages, there are some words in other languages that we don't even
Don't.
have in English. I try to, if I'm not 100% sure, and there are times where that happens, I will look at other translations and see what word maybe makes the most sense. And there are some times where
Mm.
there are really two possibilities. And I say, this is why I think this one could be better, but this also makes sense.
Now we're entering a rapid fire section. Are you ready, Carmen?
Yes.
If you could pick a third language to study, what would it be?
I already studied Italian, but I would pick Portuguese next after that.
Oh. What is one thing you fear most when writing a speech?
If I'm giving this speech, I fear that I'm going to freeze in front of people. And for other people, I fear that I didn't capture their voice correctly.
Mm. Share one childhood memory that makes you happy.
Oh, wow. I would spend every summer in Miami like any good Cuban American. I really, really loved being by the pool or by the beach.
That's amazing. What is something that you always pay attention of while reporting in a different place?
Really, my surroundings and to make sure that I'm safe.
Hmm.
As a woman, I think that's very important. And there have been times where I have felt unsafe, so I'm a little bit more aware of this now.
What is an expression or saying in Spanish that you really like?
No hay mal que dure 100 años, ni cuerpo que lo resista. And that was one of my mom's favorite sayings. And it essentially means there's no terrible thing that will last 100 years or a human body that will withstand it. So essentially, I take it to mean even if things are really bad, it's not going to be bad forever. And that definitely helps during the worst moments of life.
That's the end of rapid fire
Oh,
section.
okay.
Thank you. You also told us before that you are an advocate for mental health. How's mental health usually represented in your writings?
I think if you look for some of my writing, you'll see that I'm very, very open. I've been very open about not just having recovered from anorexia, but having lived with depression for 30 years since I was a kid. Um, and I actually wrote about my failed suicide attempt for Newsweek a few years ago. I think it's very important. I think unfortunately there's still a lot of stigma, especially for some of our communities of color and certainly for women. And so I don't know, my philosophy is if God gave it to me and if I can help somebody else through it or at least just help myself not feel as alone, then I'm just gonna put it out there. Because fear just keeps us in the shadows and it prevents us from being our full selves and getting the help that we need. So I think that's part of it. I don't know. My philosophy is I was bullied into an eating disorder that nearly killed me when I was a teenager. And
Mm.
I'm really not afraid of too many things in life. And my feeling is, of course, there's people that are going to judge you just by walking down the street without even knowing anything about you. And my feeling is the people who love me, the people who know me, they're going to have my back. They're going to support me. And if this helps anybody else in any way, then really, then I'm grateful for that. And I do this with a lot of other things, by the way. Like I'm very outspoken about grief,
Mm.
and the grief of having lost my parents, about my fertility treatments. And in fact, when I wrote about that a few years ago, a few people reached out to me and said, "Oh, I'm going through the same thing," or "My child is an IVF child." And so it became like a little community of a few of us, that found that kind of like support group,
Hmm.
and now we're less alone going through all of these things. So,
That's great.
yeah. Thank you.
In one of your articles about eating disorders, you talk about the obsession with being unhealthy, slim, and skinny as a part of Latino culture, and I can find it very similar in my own culture, in Asian culture as well. So, where do you think this obsession come from, and what do you think is the healthier way to examine our body and define our beauty?
So, I mean, look, we live in a capitalist society, right? And things sell. You want to sell anti-aging products. You want to sell bathing suits, all these different things. And I think part of it comes from that. And I think part of the culture, it's interesting because for the Latino culture, it's always like the more voluptuous, the better.
Mm.
But I just defaulted to the American, way of thinking, which is the skinnier you are, the happier. And I was not happy. Um, but I think something that has freed me in my 40s, I'm going to be 43 in May, my God. Um, I don't care. I don't care because I've learned, and certainly the worst things that could have happened already happened to me,
Mm-hmm.
including losing my parents, including ending an engagement, including like having an illness a couple years ago, brief but very scary illness that I recovered from. But all of those things were scary. And I'm at the point where if somebody's not going to like me or if somebody's going to comment on my body, that's their issue. That's not my issue. It used to be my issue and I almost died because of it. I don't care anymore. You know what I mean? And I think I see that a lot. And that's something I do appreciate from a lot of Gen Z that I've noticed. They don't seem to care either. And they seem to like own who they are. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I just hope that trend keeps happening.
And what is if you are leaving some advice for the younger girls, what would you want to
Oof.
say to them?
This is rough because we didn't really have social media when I went, and I know that that can be very painful. Um, I would say give yourself grace and understand that who you are now may not be who you are in the future. And that's very hard for like a 13-year-old to hear. So I say that even knowing that. But I just hope that they have an adult or adults in their lives that care enough and that can notice if their eating patterns are changing, if their weight is changing, that they take quick action. And I'm grateful for the people in my life who took quick action. For me, and I was hospitalized with bulimics, and they would talk a lot about binging and purging, so eating a lot and throwing up. I'm afraid of vomiting. So mine was like the opposite. I actually had stopped eating or I ate very little because I would have a lot of like stomach aches and a lot of stomach issues when I was a kid. And then when those stomach issues started fixing themselves and I had started gaining weight, I was so afraid at that point of the weight that I was gaining that I purposely started restricting my food to the point where I was eating maybe at the very end before I was hospitalized, like a piece of toast with jam. And at that
Every
point,
day,
yes. And like,
just one piece
and then I would ask my parents for baked chicken, like baked chicken breast. But at that
without
point,
oil. Okay.
but I was giving most of it to my dog. And so they kept seeing the dog gaining weight. Poor Bingo. And unfortunately, and I can't speak for everyone, but I became very deceitful. When you have an eating disorder, you're very masterful at deceiving. I certainly was. And I would say, I want to eat alone because I feel better. And then most of the food would go to the dog. And then the protein shake that I was drinking, I would put like a milk mustache, but I would
To
dump to
pretend you
pretend.
drank it. You have drink.
Yes. And then I would dump most of it out the window or yeah, I mean, look, I went down to 60 pounds and I almost died. Literally March of 1997. So I spent most of 1997 in an eating disorder hospital. I was able to leave in time for my 8th grade graduation, but then 2 days later I was back in the hospital. That was a very painful time. For me, it was, oh, I have this power. I have this control over something. I didn't have control over, the girls bullying me at school, but I can control not
Eat
eating.
it.
You know what I mean? I can
Mm-mm.
control what it says on that
Well, I can
scale.
control something I can
Yes.
control, but I cannot
Yes.
control whatever
Yes.
others do too.
But it
Yeah.
was honestly at some point your body just gets tired. I actually needed to be in a wheelchair for 2
Mm-hmm.
weeks when I was in the eating disorder hospital. When I'm telling you that I was close to death, that's not even an exaggeration. Like they had to make sure that I was medically somewhat able because and that's why I needed a nasogastric tube, and that was very painful when you're a
That was
13-year-old
intense.
child and you're getting things like that. But I was fully committed to my anorexia at that point. And so in my mind, I kept thinking, oh, when I get out of here, I'm going to lose weight again. I'm going to do this again. And unfortunately, when you're hospitalized, because I only knew how to restrict my eating and exercise. But then I learned about these pills and learned about other things. And so, unfortunately, you learn a lot of these little tricks when you're in the hospital with other people who have disordered eating as well. So,
Hmm.
I'm so grateful that I recovered from that. I don't even know now how I did it because it took years and it was really difficult. But I'm just so glad that I'm recovered from it. Also, the way our bodies are treated, I didn't again know this at the time, but it's almost like, and I'm sure men probably have comments about their bodies too, but it almost feels like with us women, it's fair game that people could just say, oh, you've lost or you've gained or you look older or you look younger or you look this, you look tired. And I'm at the point now where I'm like, enough. Like, my body is not here for public comment. No
Yeah.
one's is. And
Yeah.
so that's something that I'm more able to do now as a woman who has full agency and who's in my 40s than I would have done when I was a teenager because I didn't know how to speak back and say, this makes me uncomfortable. Please don't talk about my body.
Mm,
So yeah.
that is a lot. I'm so grateful that you are willing to share it today with
Well,
us, with
thank you.
our audiences.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
What do you think are the some of biggest misconceptions about mental health? How should we as a society better address mental health?
I think mental health is all encompassing. Like, we just tell people, and look, and I think the crisis numbers are absolutely important, right?
Mm,
But people think, oh, you just call a crisis and then that's it. But it's all encompassing, right? Because if somebody loses their job or is going through a breakup or a divorce, that's part of mental health, right? And mental wellness. And so we need to look at it from all those angles and not just, oh, well, somebody's having a bad day or somebody's going through this. Okay, but what are the systems in place that can help this person get through this period of life that is difficult for them, right? Because otherwise, what are we doing?
okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it. But I think also talking about it more and normalizing it. I was invited to a holiday dinner a few years ago where I really only knew the host and one other person. And the host's husband had, made a mention of saying, oh, people with depression, what is that? They're crazy. And I stepped into that discomfort and it was not fun.
Mhm.
But I said, who here thinks I'm crazy? Show of hands. And no one raised their hand. And I said, okay, well, but I've lived with depression since 1996. And this is what it feels like. And I said, this is what it sounds like. And this is what it's like. And people think that it's mostly in your head. It's also the physical exhaustion of some days not wanting to get up and go shower or do anything. People just expect you to sit there like a cartoon character, like sad. That's not always the case, right? Like, look at someone like Robin Williams, who always looks so happy, and he died by suicide. He was one of my favorite actors. So at that dinner, I said, well, there's a lot of us who live with depression every day, and we go to work and we go to school and we pay taxes and we vote, and it felt freeing. I'm sure some people probably judged me at that dinner. But a couple of them, said, well, thank you, because my husband is going through this or so and so is going through that. I think we don't realize that there's a lot more of us that are going through things. And when you open yourself up, it gives somebody almost a permission to
Mhm.
kind of be themselves and not feel, again, going back to my theme of not feeling alone. I think that's what
Yeah.
it is.
You have authored a book called Coping with Eating Disorders. Tell us about that book.
That was very interesting. I got to not only write about the eating disorders that I'm more familiar with, but I learned about other eating disorders as well
Mm-hmm.
and how it affects different communities. It took me about a year to write. And yeah, and it's mostly for a YA audience. And so I hope people find it and find it useful.
Yeah, you're also working on another book with which has given you some difficulties in the process. Are you
Yeah.
willing to talk about it?
So I'm part of two writing groups, and that does help because it makes me feel like, all right, like I'm being kept accountable.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm too much of a perfectionist. And so for one of the writing groups, great writing group, by the way. But I think because one of the chapters I was going in a direction where they're like, no, it should go in this other direction. I kind of froze
Mm,
and I'm like, so
that's
yeah.
not what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. So I need to step back. And I think what I need to do for myself is perfect is the enemy of the good. So I need to maybe just set aside whenever I have some free time, set aside a little time each day or each week to work on chapters and maybe not present them in the writing group yet until
The full book.
exactly so that I
Mm,
feel a little bit better. I do present a lot of my essays and those are easier and quicker to write. And so
yeah.
those are fun to bring to the group as well. But I think for now that's what I need to do. But it's very painful because it's a memoir about grief and loss and it encompasses, my parents and their losses. And so that's why I'm still kind of framing it and figuring out which direction I want to take the rest of the chapters.
Great.
Yes.
We're looking forward to hearing from this.
Thank you.
Soon. And that is the end of our show, which we always give our guests a monologue. I want to give you this prompt. Looking back, you have traveled far to get where you are now. What message would you like to give yourself, and what would you like to leave for your future?
Oh my gosh. So for my former self, I huh, I think I'd just like to give her a hug because I think she went through a lot and she always thought that she wasn't worth it. So I'd like to tell her that she is. And for my future self, I would tell her, don't focus so much on the immediate moments, focus
Yeah.
on the greater picture, and maybe make better decisions with that in mind.
That's great. That's a bit emotional. That's Carmen Cusido. And stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you.